Beautiful day. Gotta grab the sunshine. It's good for your health, gainers. Hello, gainers. Ralphie here with some fitter philosophy, on location in a beautiful green place. Let's go for a walk and talk. This video is part of my ongoing series called Investments, because when we invest in components within our lives, we are investing in life itself. And when we invest in life, like investing in anything, we get a return, we get a reward. And it's not the huge investments, it's the little investments all the time and keeping them going. And they form various components. So if you do want to see my other investment vlogs, just do a search in my channel for investment, and you will get the series, about 9 videos in all. And this particular subject of this video is health. Investing in health. Because when we're well, in other words, not sick, it's something that we take very much for granted because it's human nature to do so. And I would like to suggest to you, in all seriousness, that you step back and review your health situation and see what you can do to make healthiness healthier. There are various parts to health. As I mentioned, it's not something we give much consideration to when we are feeling well, or the absence of sickness. But in fact, something that people really miss a lot of the time is that just because we feel well doesn't necessarily mean that we're at optimum performance in our lives. And the wellness in our body directly relates to our mental health. And it's something that really gets overlooked in modern society. With the amount of toxins in the environment, in the food supply, depending on how careless we are in our eating habits, in the stress levels within our lives, and within the lifestyles that we often choose to have, which can be basically doing too much all the time and not giving ourselves a chance to step aside and recharge the batteries. Well, it inevitably affects us. So, 3 parts to investing in health. The first is not to wait till you get sick. Sure, now and again we're going to get a flu virus, a cold. We may get generally a superficial injury if we fall and damage our ankle. But generally it's nothing serious. It's something that we can quickly recover from. Although I do notice as a gym goer that there's too many people, particularly young people, who try and get back to normal too soon and simply don't give their bodies enough time to heal. We need to be patient with ourselves. And so long as we take some practical exercise, in other words, modest exercise with some intense bits in it, just like our ancestors used to do as a matter of course, as part of their survival strategy, then that is certainly a big step forward. This is most noticeable when you look at lazy people, people who do not take physical activity. They don't walk, they don't get fresh air, they snack and graze, primarily on sugar and refined carbohydrates. They begin to get obese, and whereas they think that the obesity when they're young isn't a problem, in fact they're not really got the points of reference to know what wellness is, and the feeling of positive health rather than the absence of negative ill health. And as a result of which, they tend to age more quickly, and they tend to be more prone to illnesses and diseases, and not just the physical illnesses of the common cold and perhaps an accident just taking longer to recover from, but it's a little bit more dangerous than that, particularly when you're young. People who do not look after themselves and eat badly are prone to aging more quickly, and unfortunately they're investing the wrong way. They're investing in increased risk of heart disease, of dementia, of Parkinson's, and all the other, diabetes, another great example, of overloading and stressing their heart. All these things happen so slowly, it's difficult for these folk to notice. But I recommend that when you're walking down the street where you live, have a look at the people around you. Do a bit of people watching, and you will see, as time goes by, a bigger and bigger difference between those who are investing in their health through exercise and those who are not. And this tends to kind of couple in with eating habits as well. There is a big difference, and I do mean a huge difference, between eating and getting nutrition. Nutrition is in the eating of healthy food, and we are surrounded in many countries, particularly with the so-called Western diet, with unhealthy food. It tends to be processed, refined. Excuse me, I've got a fly, and get off. Someone's trying to photobomb my video, and it flies, and it's very, very small. It's the time of year. So where was I? Investing in health. We will see the very tangible benefits as soon as we get practical exercise and experience a little bit of discomfort. You see, there's too many people out there, they don't want to be uncomfortable when they exercise. So you see them start to get a little bit uncomfortable, and then they stop. And then they rest, and then they continue to rest, and it's not working for them. They're not pushing themselves. So we all have to push ourselves, whether it be the relative gentleness of a brisk walk, which leaves us slightly breathless, or whether it be running up a hill now and again, or doing some heavy lifting in the gym. And I must say, I'm very impressed, and I do notice this, how at the gym where I go to, the older people in the gym, they're not just physically fitter, they're not just more focused, they're mentally sharper. Makes a big, big difference. And the food we eat is highly relevant. It's not about all these energy snacks, energy bars, consuming more protein. It's much simpler than that. It's fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, the lack of chemically loaded processed foods, which so many people regard as the norm of a contemporary diet. And I put it to you this way: the preservatives that go into food, the flavour enhancers, the additional salt, the sugar, because sugar always sells a food, it's part of the bliss point. All these things tend to come from agrochemicals, agrochemical crops, so that in the production of sugar, for example, soy, another good example, and commercial red meats that we get in processed frozen foods, often they've come from a source where chemicals are used, pesticides, fungicides, preservatives. All these, when they're used, their purpose is to poison. Think about it. Poison insects, poison fungus, and I'll give you a topical tip here. Next time you buy an apple, and you think there's nothing healthier than a fresh apple, but put it in the sink and boil a kettle. When the kettle's boiled, for about 5 seconds, pour the boiling water on top of the apple, and then immediately cool it under the cold tap. Once you have cooled it down, sit it beside your sink and let it dry out. And if it is a standard commercial supermarket style of apple, what you will notice is a milky, cloudy substance forming in the skin. And that is wax. And the wax is there to make the apple look beautiful. It is there to seal the apple, make it last longer. It has in it a range of chemicals, which if you didn't do this, you wouldn't even know they were there. So this idea that a vegetarian diet is automatically healthier with lots of fruit and veg, it really depends where you source them. Now, buying organic apples and buying locally is very virtuous, and it's a good idea. But it also can be quite expensive, and we're not necessarily in a position where we have access to these all the time. So prepare your fresh fruit and veg carefully. Just be aware of it. Do a search online, the agrochemicals. Just start with that, search for agrochemical. In sugarcane, you see, they can greatly increase the volume of production by spraying with glyphosate, for example. So do your research in that. And also be aware that when we buy a bag of sugar, in other words, the white crystalline sugar that we use in baking and such like, and putting in our tea or coffee, whatever we're drinking, that it's highly refined. It's in its pure chemical form. It's utterly flavourless, but it has got this overwhelming sensation of sweetness. And it's fine to have a little of it, but not too much. Another thing to be aware of is the processing of oils, for example, of seed oils, of sunflower, for example, rapeseed, vegetable oil. It is actually quite an intensive chemical process, and it may be, depending how much you eat, contributing to your lack of wellness. So you might not be feeling sick on it, but unfortunately, through this consumption, you're investing in ill health in the future. It's quite a long journey. We can't suddenly get this eureka moment overnight as regards the complexities of what is and what isn't in the food supply. But I can tell you what you've got to watch in that, for example, breakfast cereal. They declare that many breakfast cereals are fortified with vitamins, fortified with iron, fortified with this, that and the next thing. We've got to ask ourselves why. And the reason is simple, that during the industrial process of these foodstuffs, the natural vitamins are quite probably removed completely. And a synthetic substitute is never ideal when we have access and the option of the natural sourced alternatives. And this is why we've got to really think carefully about what we eat, what we consume, as regards investment in our health. Another thing we need to really invest in for our health is managing stress. With the louder and louder white noise of modern life, it is very tempting to think that it's normal and that we can cope. And generally, when we're younger in particular, we can cope. But as time goes on, it gets harder and harder, because we are being bombarded by messages, attitudes and information which, rather like industrial food processes, is highly processed. The information, the messaging that we get from newspapers, television, radio, and what is pertained to be news and information is frequently misinformation or someone else's information according to their own specific agenda, which is rarely in our interests. So we have to sift through this. We have to manage it. And one of the best ways of managing it is switch it off. Just switch off your television, switch off your radio, switch off your mobile device. Yeah, I know, it's a challenge. It's frightening to start with. What are you missing? Let me tell you, you're missing nothing. You're missing nothing, because as soon as you remove all that stress that's being imposed through information and media, you're on your own. Initially, it can be a bit of a shock. This is when we realised how plugged in we are to the system. But by simply taking a couple of hours to go and sit in the garden, go for a walk with no more mobile devices, not listening to anything, and having the constant rhythm of the pace of our walking, we will in fact suddenly find ourselves in a de-stressed zone. And when we are unstressing, that's when we find out and discover, quite by default, how stressed we actually are. Stress, in my opinion, is a major impactor on general health. And the more we can avoid stress, the healthier we will be, both physically and mentally. These stresses, rather like the food that we are tempted and encouraged to eat through advertising and messaging, they tend to be ambient. There's nothing significantly overtly toxic about it. It's not as if we're taking a draft of cyanide, nothing like that. But figure it out, as the years go by, all this ambient toxicity, inevitably it is impacting on our health. Even our water. We need to check how clean and clear our water is, and we need to detoxify what we consume and what we absorb through our senses in order to detoxify our lives. We become more aware what it actually is, and we discover that in the whole process we are investing in our health. Our circumstances genetically are like a loaded gun, but it's lifestyle that pulls the trigger on that gun. And the more we lead a contaminated lifestyle, contaminated by food and stress and industrial water, I'll leave it at that, the more we start to pull on that trigger to shorten our lives. And importantly, it's not just the longevity of our life, it's the quality of our lives. The more we're in a state of wellness, the more we gain from the quality of life. And I would conclude by saying it's not so much the years in our life that matter at the end of the day. It's the amount of life in our years. There are many people, and I've seen it many a time, who will live more life, more positively, more proactively, more healthily in a shorter life than those who struggle on through ill health and banality and maybe have a few extra years. Although I have to say, it's not generally what happens. People who invest in health holistically generally have more time, and very importantly, it's the quality of that time. It's the absence of aches and pains. It's when, having established a clean diet and a stress-free environment, we start to look at the herbs around us, the supplements, and the value they can be to us individually, whether it be ashwagandha or fresh garlic in our diet, or the simple things. Keeping it simple, KIS, it really stacks up. And it's the little things that we do all the time that have the biggest impact, because we sustain them as a habit, a lifestyle habit, investing in health. I'm Ralphie. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've enjoyed it, click subscribe, all the rest of it, and pop back again in about a week's time when I will have a fresh video up. Hope you've enjoyed this, and thank you for your time. I shall leave you with this lovely view of a family picnic area near where I live, and it's a beautiful spot. It's got a road nearby so that people who have difficulty walking or are handicapped or have young kids have a nice safe space, and it's easy access. And every community should have these, because it's a community garden of sorts, a green space, and there's nothing that gets you better in the mood for investing in health than a place like this, particularly when the sun is shining.